Ben, we're going to run it all the way back. So we'll start right at the top. So everyone, thank you so much for coming out and watching for the TSMU Q&A series. I'm your host, Mark Hubbard. Today, I'm joined by Ben Green. Ben, how's it going?
Good, man. For real this time. I'm doing pretty good. I was saying this is karma because I interviewed Ali twice on the Legion channel, and both times we had the same exact issue. So I think they're just getting me back, punking me a
It's
little
just
bit.
wheels pulled it full circle. That's all it really
Yeah,
was. Well, so for
exactly.
for all the viewers here, for this Q&A series, we will be polling questions from the TSMU Discord. So if you have a question for Ben, head on over to discord.gg/TSMU and ask your question in the Ask Stream Questions Here channel. They've done everything they could to make it as straightforward as possible. Once you've asked your question, join the waiting room voice channel and wait to be pulled onto the show and spend some time talking with Ben here. So, Ben, while we get the questions queued up and ready for you, why don't you go ahead and give yourself a little introduction and tell everyone who you are?
Sure. So my name is Ben. I'm the online community manager for Lenovo, and I manage the gaming and the student segments. Primarily, gaming is what I've been in the longest, but I also picked up the education segment about half a year ago. And so what that means is we have our Lenovo.com community specifically, which is like forums and groups and videos on the site, and I manage those. So the moderation side and getting content up there and engaging with members and trying to keep it very active and just growing that base. So that's my primary responsibility. I also work on the Discord. That just kind of happened organically with Legion over the last year or so. And the Twitch side, I host the live streams for the Legion Twitch 2 days a week. And my friend Jeff from Lenovo does the other 2 days. So that's the quick version. Also involved a lot of partnerships and things like that. But at the end of the day, like my core kind of function is working on those online communities. And I say that because community manager means a lot of different things to different companies, whether it's like social media or things like that. So I'm less involved on like Instagram and Twitter and those traditional social medias, more on the Lenovo.com community specifically.
Gotcha. Perfect. Well, Ben, let's we're gonna have plenty to talk about tonight, but I think with that we can go ahead and pull on in the first caller to ask you a question. So we are joined by Panda Turtle. Panda, thank you so much for calling in. You've called into every one of these I've been on. So what question do you have for Ben here?
I was curious if has there been any consistent like aspects that you've noticed when it comes to like growing the community?
Yeah, good question. So in terms of consistent aspects, I mean, there's a lot of things involved in growing a community. If you're just looking for growth in general, I mean, things like giveaways are always pretty popular, right? In terms of getting people in the door and interested in something. Of course, keeping people involved in the community is a whole nother piece. And usually like a giveaway alone isn't probably going to have someone stick around and be active if they just want that freebie and then they leave. So a lot of it more is not just doing like really easy to enter giveaways, but also things like contests where you might have someone like submit something and try to be more active in the community to be able to win that, or even just doing like exclusive stuff in the community, something that you can offer in the community that you can't really get anywhere else. Kind of like TSMU, what you guys are doing here is pretty unique. On the Legion side, and for a lot of communities I worked on in the past, it's a lot about like exclusive events and some sort of shared interest and mission in the community. So whether like on the Legion side, that's obviously the product side most of the time. TSM could be things like esports. Having that shared connection is pretty important. But if you're just looking at growth, I mean, giveaways are always a pretty consistent way to get attention and people into the community.
So it seems like the harder part is like keeping people staying, I guess. I guess has there been a pattern that you've noticed for like having people stay around?
Yeah, so that's always been the harder thing. I think there's a couple things that go into it. I would say probably the most important thing, it varies community to community, but mission is a big part of it. So like what are you representing by joining the community? Having that clearly defined as the community manager is pretty important, and with your team. So I work with a range of community managers, and it's important that you guys kind of align on what the mission of joining the community is, whether that's a simple thing like just getting the most out of your product, or if it's more advanced, like if you want to support a charity or some bigger cause related to gaming or other online communities. I think that one's pretty big because that will kind of just make you feel like you're part of something bigger when you're part of the community and not just there for a freebie. And then also just consistency with stuff. So a lot of times, like you do a giveaway, one giveaway alone is not going to probably lead to a lot of retention. That's the word we use for people coming back. But if you do a couple of those month after month, and then like couple that with some content or some other stuff people can expect regularly, then you start to build that habit sort of and that familiarity. And also just encouraging members to kind of build connections with each other with events and things like that. Because I think like the connections with other people are one of the strongest things that bring people back to communities, as well as just the sense that something new is going to be there each time, or something exciting that you're kind of used to seeing about a set interval or so. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for your time.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. Anything else, Panda?
I'm good. Thank you.
Absolutely. As always, really appreciate you coming in.
You too.
Cool. So Ben, with that, we keep flowing. The questions are pouring in pretty quickly through these text channels. So we do have another one teed up for you. And I actually really love this one. So Leanne asks, how do you balance your mental health and personal feelings with the responsibility to your job, especially dealing with difficult or emotionally taxing situations?
Yeah, this is a really good question. Especially for, I mean, especially in wake of the last year or so of everyone kind of working online, but especially a job like community manager where you kind of at some point you have to be looking at the community all hours of the day, or so it feels like that, to moderate things and also just like keep track of what's going on and keep things interesting so people are still talking and being involved. Um, I think it kind of helps me to looking if your question was about like mental health specifically and personal feelings. So I think it is helpful to realize like if you set yourself a certain amount of time to be working during the day and then step away for a bit, even if it can be tempting, like from my own experience, to keep looking at something, if it's just Discord or wherever you're managing your community and trying to keep tabs on it, making sure it's all working well. But if you kind of build yourself out a good moderator team, or if you have other staff members that you work with on the community, that really helps kind of lighten the load a little bit. And I just think stepping away is pretty crucial, because if you just spend all your time looking at the community and worrying about it, then you're gonna get anxious and kind of drive yourself crazy. So personally, that helps me to just take a break back and then let people know you'll be gone for a certain amount of time, and let community members know like if they have questions, these are better hours for me. Otherwise, moderators and other people can help. So I think that's what's helped me the most. I know, Mark, you've probably felt some of this too, because everyone's working from home these days now. So like office hours don't exist to an extent anymore.
Yeah, finding the balance right now, especially work from home, is challenging is an understatement, right? So like to touch a little bit farther on that, so you highlighted a lot about building out the right team. So and building out like people who can honestly kind of offset some of the things that are going to fall into your back. So when you're looking for teammates, right, like team members, or building out the moderator team, excuse me, what are you doing? How are you screening that? What goes into building it? What do you hit a certain point where you know you need these things? What kind of insight can you offer there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for the moderator stuff specifically, so right now we use an application process, which is what I've just always kind of done. It tends to be people who are the most involved in the community. I think we have like one of the Legion moderators in the TSMU chat right now. But basically, yeah, Fidget, what's up, man? It helps if you've been there for a while and you kind of been part of the community and know the backstory of it and have just been involved in helping grow it. I think that's pretty important. So you have that passion, but also just if you had any experience moderating stuff in the past, that's obviously pretty helpful. If you have some other Discords or Reddits or anything else that you've worked on in the past, and then also trying to work out like a schedule of staggering basically, so that it's not like 5 mods all working at the same time and then everyone goes to sleep and no one's moderating anything. That helps a lot. In terms of when to add a new person, I don't really have like a set benchmark for that. There might be one out there, but it's more like you get the sense for if you have certain events where you see a ton of people coming into the community, or if discussion has just gone like way up all of a sudden, then I think you might get the sense you need to add somebody new. And so what we do is just have like a rolling application process. And then when we hit the point where we need somebody new to join, we just go look into our application pool and see who kind of is the best fit and most interested in it.
Cool. So another thing you also mentioned in your answer for Leanne was you talked about setting and defining yourself boundaries, which is we said that's hard work from home right now, right? It's super tough, and you're especially in a position, right? Like one, both of us work at a global company, but you being a community manager, right? There's a in community and social media especially, right? There's an always on aspect to that job, right? So how do you kind of go about setting those boundaries? How do you maintain that balance? What are some hints and strategies you've got?
Yeah, so I don't really have like hard office hours. I try to work like 8 to 5 ish, right? for the most part. But it depends really what's going on in the community. Like if there's some big, like for example, this last month or so, we've had a lot of new Legion products drop in the US. And so our community activity has like shot up from people just asking about when's it coming out and how do you do this with your laptop and all this stuff. So like right now is probably going to be a period where there's more activity in the community and I have to kind of be ready to be more active. But I think like in any community, there's going to be kind of ebbs and flows of when there's a lot of activity and then it kind of falls off a little bit and comes back up for certain events or things happening. So I think I would say during those events, you should know that you're going to have to be a little more active probably if you want to take advantage of that engagement, but not to overwork it. And still, like you should never feel like you have to be on all the time working on that kind of stuff. And just give yourself some space on the weekends or whenever you can fit it into the moderation schedule to step away and really step away, not like keep checking the whole time you're stepping away. That's one thing I've struggled with in the past. Because I think having that separation really is important to refresh your mind and not drive yourself crazy with questions and things people are asking all the time.
I love it. I love it. Leanne, thank you so much for the question. Hope we covered all the bases there. Really tried hard to make sure we got through them all. With that, Ben, we're gonna keep on rolling. So we've got another one teed up here from Kirby Rocket. So, first of all, Kirby Rocket, love the name, love the name. But Kirby Rocket asks, how exactly do you know when you may be reaching your limits and/or maybe experiencing burnout as a community manager? So it's actually a two-part question, but let's. Oh, where we go. So, and the second part is, and what do you believe is the best way to approach burnout and overexhaustion if you're experiencing it?
Interesting. I think in terms of when you're reaching your limits or burnout. So a couple things. One would be like if you're getting to the point where you can't reply to everyone anymore, which again, this happens to me in waves where you'll get like a ton of messages from people and it's all at once. And sometimes it's fine, it's less activity. But if you're hitting the point where you just can't respond to people, then that's probably a sign that you need to get more help on moderation or work out some better system to have people help out with that kind of thing. I think also like if you feel yourself obviously like you're having issues trying to sleep or you're just anxious all the time and you know it's because of this, then that's again probably a sign that you're working a little bit too hard on this or need some better support structures to help with that. I think with burnout, like the best thing you can ever do with burnout is just take a break. That's my kind of view on it. And if you can do that, I mean, obviously that's a luxury for some people, but stepping away and just like getting rid of your phone, completely stepping away from it is always the best thing for me when I'm trying to like get away from the burnout and kind of get myself more excited about the project again. So that's what I'd say for burnout in general. But I think I was listening to Dunk's interview. I think like to an extent, it's okay to work hard in some periods and then kind of recover in others because it's just how the business goes, how any community goes. Like you're gonna have periods where it's super busy and then periods where it calms down a little bit. You can take a breather before the next activity. And that's honestly just how you get the most out of certain events too, in my opinion.
Okay, so I kind of following up on that one a little bit. So, you also, right? So on top of managing Lenovo's community and driving a lot of efforts to meet your KPIs and growing that community, right? You also do stuff in your off time, right? So even when you're not community managing, you're community managing. How do you manage that balance? Is it still refreshing for you to step into like the Ben Green community, the Ben Green efforts? Is that enough of a break from the Lenovo one? How do you not hit a wall there? Because man, that's it's amazing you're able to do that. That's a tough balance.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm fortunate because I really just love doing this stuff. I love gaming, especially. You know, I work on student, but gaming is what I came in for, and it's just what I've been doing for years. And I just love content, specifically Twitch stuff. So I do like a podcast on the side, and that just is different enough from what I do at my day job that it kind of works with the same industry that I think it makes a lot of sense. And I just really enjoy doing it. What I don't do, so what I've done in the past is like try to do a personal YouTube at the same time as doing all this other stuff and like stick to a release schedule. And that was hitting the point where I was doing too much, I think. So I dialed that back and just kind of release things when I can. I basically try not to put too much pressure on the outside life because if I try to like hold myself to these rigid standards with other stuff and then also do things at work, that's going to cause too much overexhaustion, I think. So the key is kind of to find a pace that works for you. And also the content types that work for you if you want to do that kind of thing. Like podcasting for me is very easy. Making a YouTube video is a lot harder and more involved. So
Sure.
I can afford to do more of those than do YouTube videos and that kind of thing.
So what are some so burnout and exhaustion, right? We can't touch on that enough. Because again, work from home, right? Work from home, it's so hard to disconnect. What are some of your indicators, right? When you know when in your head when you're saying, "Hey, I think I'm hitting this point, like I'm approaching burnout." Ideally, you take a break right before you actually hit that point of overexhaustion. What are some of
Mhm.
the litmus tests you have to know? I might be I need a break. I need a breather.
Yeah, I think again, I would say if you have trouble sleeping because you're still thinking about things you have to get done, or any issues sleeping like that, usually is a sign for sure. Also, just general anxiety. Like if I'm feeling like I have to have a lot of coffee or something, and I'm kind of nervous going into meetings, and there's a lot of just stress in general. Again, probably a good sign. There's some burnout going on there. And last thing I would say is just like lack of motivation to an extent, especially if it's like over an extended period. Like if there's a month long period where it's kind of on the whole time, that's probably a sign that I should like plan to have a vacation at the end of that or give myself time to look forward to. One thing that really helps me is having like checkpoints to get to almost mentally. Say like, okay, I know this week is going to be hard, but we have like a trip coming up or something, or I know I have this coming up to get to, and so that helps me have a goal kind of to get through to, and know that I can work hard now, take a breather at this point, as long as it's actually enough of a breather, not like I get to have a couple hours off and then we're going back to it, right? It's got to be actually good for your mind and soul at that point.
Gotcha. Perfect. Well, Kirby Rocket, thanks a ton for the question. And also, again, fantastic name. Love the name. Coming up next, Ben, we've got one from Fidget Ice. I think I'm saying that correct. So, Fidget Ice, I'm so sorry if I'm saying that wrong. But they ask, oh, excuse me. What are the other things that you do in the community that isn't interacting with members, right? So, I think we can do. So, what are some of the things you do in the community that isn't just member interaction? And I don't know, Fidget Ice, if you mean like things on the back end that Ben does or what, but we'll
Yeah.
take that as interpretation. We'll dive a little deeper after your first answer.
Yeah, I can talk to that. So Fidget, by the way, is one of the mods from the Legion
Oh,
community that I mentioned. So I just
okay.
call him
Hey,
Fidget.
Fidget. Yeah, there we go.
So it's a good question. I think again, my main responsibility is to kind of help with the engagement and the growth of the communities. But there's a lot that goes into that. That's not just directly talking to people or doing promotions. I think some of the things are like working with partners on ways that we can work on some special community offer, whether it's like a deal that's going on or a giveaway, things like that. As well as I do manage the Twitch stream, like I said. So lining up interviews with staff members, cough Mark soon, and some other people like from TSM, like Al, you've come on in the past, just to give more of that exclusive content stuff we've talked about. And then a lot of it is like team meetings. So not only working within my team, but like working with other parts of Lenovo and figuring out how they want to work with the community, whether to do some sort of cool event or offer, or like how we can inform other teams of what's happening in community to let them know like kind of what our performance is for a certain month and how uh, they can do things on their end off of that, or work with us in certain ways if we have a new kind of content piece coming out or something like that. So I think a lot of it is cross team partnerships and helping other teams not use the community but know what's happening there, and kind of work with other partners on that front too.
So I'm going to give everyone a little bit of extra detail because this is something that, without explanation, it's kind of difficult to understand how difficult your job specifically can be. So for people, Lenovo is a very large company, right? It is a massive company, and we have essentially two segments of the company of like the worldwide company, which in kind of like it covers the how the brand is represented globally, and then we have the geos, right? Like the geographies that do their own kind of activations. You're on the worldwide side of things, correct? So
Yeah,
okay,
I am. Although, like, I really am involved in the North America side specifically, but I'm on a worldwide team. Yeah.
gotcha. So with that, right, you have to weight a lot of considerations in there, right? Like, because you might not just be being seen by North America. So other geos have things that are right, like different products, for example, right? They might not have the same product.
Yes.
How does that go on the back end, right? Like your cross team is an understatement. You have a lot of teams, whether it's internal Lenovo, whether it's Intel, Nvidia, AM, whoever it is, you have a lot to balance. So dive a little deeper into that because people that's not obvious to your viewers, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think because Lenovo, like you said, is a huge organization. So
Right.
I would say, like you said, internally, there's the two sides to it. There's the worldwide view, which is things like the Discord and the Twitch, which are just blanket for every country, right? And so they have to kind of appeal to people regardless of what products are available in which country and languages and things like that. And there's also just the geo side, which is just North America in my case, and doing things specific to that region. So like in this past month, we had Legion products released in the US, but not in like UK and Australia and these places. So it's kind of having the balance of like, how do you message things to community members who are in North America versus ones who are global? And then also, how do you work with the teams to get information of stuff things that are dropping in the next month, or even just programs specific to a certain country that aren't available to other countries. So that's definitely that big piece of it. And then in terms of working with partnerships, kind of the same thing. Certain partners are global, certain partners are kind of focused on certain regions. So a lot of the brands that I work with, partnerships are on the global side. I don't manage the partnerships, but I work with the team that works on the partnerships, if that makes sense. And a lot of times the partnerships want to do something with community, whether it is like these live interviews or if there's some special bundle or offer with the community, or content even. We have a lot of content from like the Intel side, for example. So it's a lot of figuring out how to take different offers from different regions and whether they can extend globally or if they're really focused on a certain part of the world. And so if it's an NA thing, then it comes to me. If it's somewhere else, then I still should know about it, but it might not necessarily go out the same time as other regions. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, I think it nailed it. Like I said, that part of the job, it's not obvious to customers, it's not obvious to community members, but just hits very much on Fidget's question of like, hey, what do you do? Obviously, you're interacting with the community, right? You're driving incredible community efforts. There's a lot else that goes on, right? You have your Wednesday meeting day. That is
Yes.
there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of back end stuff that you have to balance as well, and I want to make sure that's obvious, right? Because it's explained. It's because it's not obvious. Well, Fidget, thanks a ton for the question. We're gonna keep going. And tax evasion, you are back. I appreciate you so much, tax evasion. So they have another good question for you. So Lenovo is a computing giant, but how do you try and balance presenting Lenovo Legion as its own thing versus drawing from the already built success of Lenovo?
Man, that's a really good question. So I do want to preface this by saying, once again, there are even multiple community managers within Lenovo, right? So I'm the online community manager for Legion and EDU communities on Lenovo. It's like that's the full title if you could drag it out. There are other community managers. Yeah, exactly, right. There are other managers for even like specific handles on social media. So Lenovo US, Legion, as well as within certain countries. Like there's even things like that. So there's a lot involved in that. I think this is it's a good question because Legion is still very involved with Lenovo, right? That's obviously the master brand, but Legion's also kind of its own sub brand. And I think a lot of the strength from Legion comes from Lenovo's own history of like you said, being a computing giant. But it also wants to be its own thing that it stands apart from Lenovo in a sense. So I think it really just depends on knowing what the audience for Legion is versus Lenovo, because even just today, people were talking about like new Lenovo laptops that are very comparable to Legion laptops. And so like, why is Lenovo doing this twice? But really it's appealing to those two different segments of people in different ways, because certain people might want things in a laptop for gaming that aren't present in a Lenovo laptop, and then vice versa. People who might want a general Lenovo laptop might not care about like RGB and things like that in a Legion product. So I think that's more on the product side. In terms of the community, it's kind of the same thing where you would message differently to Legion fans than from Lenovo fans, because again, they're more interested in Legion in general, or even just gaming. Like a lot of our community is people who don't even own a Legion product, but they just like gaming. And so as Legion, we can talk to those people in a more real way than Lenovo, who it doesn't really have that connection as hard as tight as Legion for that audience. So I hope that answers that a little bit. Yeah. But basically, it's really making a more direct connection with the gaming audience with the Legion brand.
Yeah, tax evasion, really tough question. Just candidly, super tough question. Because I'm sure Ben knows this as well. That exact thing of striking the balance between Legion as a standalone brand and Lenovo as a standalone brand, and having like Legion being clearly, that's a balance we have conversations on that on a regular basis, right? That's part of our annual reviews to make sure that the brands are getting enough attention. Another piece of the job that's not necessarily obvious to everyone else is you have to have a lot of those really, really tough conversation. So does any part of that, right? Like, so when we walk away from reviews and we go, hey Ben, for North America, right? North America, it's no secret, Lenovo and Legion has a long way to go to close the gap between us and our competitors. We're aware of that. What are some of the ways you does that go into your strategy for how you approach streams? Does that go into your strategy for things you drive with the community? What do you typically do with that information? On a general sense, you don't have to get too specific, but
no, it's a good question. I know you're probably much in this conversation as well with these kind of questions. But from the community side, like definitely looking at competition is something that we definitely do, and kind of measure up like what are some of the other brands doing versus what we can do in terms of closing the gap, like you said, or just staying in the lead. I think looking just across the community, it's like, what are other communities out there? How can Legion kind of be different than these other options? And can we offer something that's really exciting? Apart from even Lenovo, like what can Legion do specifically that Lenovo might not be able to with partnerships or with certain opportunities? And so we've done some cool kind of community events like that. I think, like you said, it's an ongoing process, and because Legion's a relatively new brand relative to Lenovo. I don't think like it's a solved thing completely yet, but we really have made an effort to, like I said, really make a very unique approach to Legion that isn't just like the rest of Lenovo, but has some things that people who like Legion products or gaming in general would be more interested in, whether that's events that we're hosting or content that we're doing that might not resonate as well on Lenovo as a whole, but for the gaming audience, we can make something pretty unique on that side. So I hope that answers the content side.
Sure.
The Twitch stuff in particular is very new, so I think we're still iterating on that quite a bit, but definitely looking at other options out there from other brands and really trying to think of new exclusive things to do, which I talked about earlier is I think so important for community and content, especially like what's something very unique that you can't really get anywhere else. And so stuff like the TSM interviews that we've done, and partnerships and those kind of things that you could only get in Legion community. I think more of those things help a lot with that.
Perfect. Ben, fantastic answer. Tax evasion, as always, appreciate you and the hard-hitting questions. We have a voice caller now, so we actually have Kirby Rocket's going to join us from text to voice. Kirby, again, awesome name,
Kirby.
But welcome. What do you have for Ben?
Hello. It's nice to meet you. Before I have anything, I have an introduction, I should say. Hi. Again, I'm Kirby Rocket. You guys all know that by now. I am the community manager at Zyspon. That's XYSSPON. We make games, Monster Girls. They're all safe for work. Just, I'm looking at you, chat. It's safe for work. Anyway, so my question is, of course, if I can actually read, which I'm not good at, what is the best advice you could give to any new and upcoming community managers within the industry? And this is something I asked, especially as someone who started when I was literally 14 years old doing content moderation for the esports event, Genesis 3, which is focused on pretty much all the games in the Super Smash Bros. Series. So,
yeah, it's a good question. So I think this is one that probably a lot of people would be wondering is how do you get into it, right? And I don't want to be the dead horse, but obviously getting some experience helps a lot. But I think community management's pretty unique in that you can really get a lot of experience on your own, in a sense, by just going in, building your own community or working on an existing one. Sorry, you're gonna say something?
Oh no. I mean, outside of like, I would totally 100% agree as someone who, that's literally how I got into Genesis 3. I simply asked because I felt it was something that should be handled rather than playing a cesspool of Twitch chat with over 100,000 people.
Well, so a couple of things. First of all, like I said earlier, the community management title means a lot of things to a lot of different companies. So I think kind of figuring out what you want to do. Like if you want to work on social media, that's one thing. If you want to manage and moderate communities, that's similar, but like a little bit different. So getting good in that one skill set, obviously having experience in all of them is probably good because a lot of companies like have that value of, even if it's not your main job, you might dabble in some social media or graphic creation, that kind of thing. But I think just getting some experience and again, managing your own communities or joining some other ones out there and joining the mod team for those is a great way to get some experience. And you can even put some of that stuff on your resume, honestly, for certain communities or companies that you want to eventually work for. I think also one thing that's pretty cool with gaming is there's a lot of companies that want to get into a gaming community management, but like don't know how to do it or haven't even started yet. So you could actually have a pretty unique advantage that way if you kind of have a really good track record, even if it's just small, of these communities you've been part of moderating. That can make you stand out, especially in companies that haven't been in gaming in the past but want to get into gaming. I've seen a lot of places do that where they might have a lot of more traditional applicants who have management experience, but not like gaming community management experience. So if you can make yourself stand out a little bit in that field, that helps out a lot with those types of places. That's just kind of my 2 cents on that.
Well, yeah, I would 100% agree with that, especially since I'll actually go back to when you mentioned putting content moderation on your resume. That's actually how I, for example, when I first came out of high school at 18 years old, was able to get Wave 1 interviews with Discord's Trust and Safety team. I had been doing this, obviously, 4 years at the time. So I was almost at the senior level, fresh out of high school. It's something that you can do, even on the larger scale of things, just volunteering your time. And even if you haven't been paid a dime like I haven't for the past 6 years, pain. It it still can go a really long way. I mean, after I got to Wave 1 at Discord, I ended up getting Wave 2 at Safety Ops at Twitch. Yeah, the people when we're looking at you chat, when you report, yeah, that was that job. But overall, it's something that can go a long way, even from starting up. As soon as you hit the magical 13 number, I will tell you, everything from there can happen. And even starting small, I think where I first started entirely was at a local venue here in South Florida. And from there, other tournament organizers had recognized my work from down there and had decided to allow me to do the big event, just because they had no one. And when they saw that some child, it's always how you're going to be referred to, I hate to break it, is doing some god tier work, it will get you noticed. Even Twitch staff will recognize that, because usually in large esports events, there will be Twitch staff spectating. Granted that a lot of people are into whatever the game is.
Yeah, and I think you'll see that become, like, putting moderation experience on your resume become more of a accepted thing as this goes on, and as the esports and gaming industry just grows and grows. I think that'll be pretty standard. So, like you said, just starting small and then snowballing into bigger and bigger opportunities is a great way to do that. If you don't really have like a job you can go get, because sometimes it's tough to find that stepping stone, sort of. I think that's a great way to get started and just show what you can do before you eventually join a company if you want to do that.
Yeah, I would especially say even with getting jobs. I mean, I'm 20 years old. I've been doing this for 6 years, and I still have not been able to get a solidified job, strictly because when I apply to anywhere that's not gaming related, people will not understand entirely, and it's gonna take a few years. But if you're like young, let's say 13 right now, by the time you get to my age, it's gonna be pretty standard already. I mean, we've already got some esports events, even on ESPN, ESPN2, stuff like that. It's becoming mainstream, and some colleges even will offer scholarships. I think NYU is one of them. I could be wrong, but there's several other universities as well within the United States, and I think some other countries as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. Never mind. I don't trust chat. But yeah, it's something worth doing, even with the painfully empty wallet that you have. Though some schools might not struggle to recognize it, but other than that, it's all right.
Yeah, again, I think it'll become more accepted as it goes on, and it may take some time to get that. The hard part is just making sure you're hireable too. If you want to go work for a company for it, I mean, the experience is one part of it. Make sure you put it together in a good package of something that looks hireable, like I said, in a resume or whatever that ends up looking like. Because you also have to adapt to whatever company you want to work for. Like if it's a more traditional company, that's going to be a different resume and application experience than a very gaming focused brand that's very familiar with that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I also had to experience when trying to go for say for example my local school district of redacted, because I don't like giving out my location. But in the same field that I would have to deal with in comparison to community management and gaming, I would have to basically gut almost everything gaming related. I still would have social media management, but that's as far as that goes, because you can't have gaming and schooling in the same sentence without all the old people looking at this like, what am I reading? So at the same time, and of course, it's technically a government job, you have to find that middle ground and that balance between where would you apply, what would you apply, and if you would be willing to be in that sort of environment. No, I don't think. I do think there is a level where willfulness comes after just the fact of having a job. Like I would say, in 2 years' time, if I still don't have a job, I just need a job. I need something. But other than that, even with being able to gather experience as a community manager, let's say if when as someone who is new and upcoming, there's plenty of resources out there. I remember you were mentioning moderation applications as well. Um, but that's also not the only way you can go about that. There's especially for depending on the size. Like if you're at a small size, applications might not actually be something you'd be looking for. And I know Discord has a community resource, community made resource published by themselves, published by Discord, but it's made by the community, and it's available. I'll probably link it in the TMU Discord, and if you guys are not in the TMU Discord, you can type !Discord to get into that. I'm
Well,
sorry, I'll do the shilling for you.
no problem. Well, Kirby, Rocket, thanks so much for calling in and asking the questions for Ben, being part of the show. I really appreciate it.
Not a
Thank you,
problem
man.
at all. Take
Okay,
care.
done. Yeah,
You
you too,
too.
Kirby. Awesome. So, Kirby, thanks for calling in. Ben, with that, before we move on to the next ones, I just want to give everyone a reminder that if you want to be involved in the conversation, you can join the TSMU Discord at discord.gg/TSMU. This is a fantastic resource that TSM has put together for everyone to get better insights for career paths and what it's like to work in gaming and esports industry. So do make sure you're joining the community, getting involved, asking questions for guests like Ben, or even just jumping in to join the community and network and enjoy some good game nights. So one more time, everyone, that is discord.gg/TSMU. Feel free to jump on in and join the conversation with Ben and I. And with that, Ben, we're going to go right on into the next question. So we have one from Jax Main. Oh no. Jax Main in the chat. Oh no. Well, Jax Main asks, how do they get involved in the social media esports scene without an academic background in communication or business? Yeah. So do you have any advice for someone who maybe doesn't have a background for community management or business, and how they might want to break into the more professional side of community and social media management?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of similar to the other question. Again, community management's pretty cool because you can get a lot of experience without going to school for it necessarily. If you just kind of find yourself ways to moderate, or even like making content and building your own social media brands, because I keep saying this, but community management means a lot of things to a lot of people. So if you can kind of dip your feet in everything, maybe specialize in one thing, but that again is social media or moderation, that kind of stuff. I think you can build up a pretty strong portfolio that way, especially if you get to work with certain brands, even if you're not paid, like our last caller said, to work with those brands. But there's still something that's recognizable to people to put on a resume. And again, you may have to start smaller and kind of step your way up to certain brands if you want to get into, I think you said, more kind of traditional media or esports stuff. Esports, you probably have an easier path because again, people are more familiar with how difficult moderating a 20,000 person Discord can be and things like that. So I think it's more viable to kind of put that on a resume versus if you're going to more traditional company, they're going to have no idea what that really entails. So again, kind of adapting to whatever your target area is. For esports, I would say definitely build up your own experience with content, and I ideally kind of build your own community if you can, but even just being very involved in an existing community is really good to have that experience, and even talk about things that you've done with that community, whether it's events or again, content pieces you've published or things like that, to kind of show what you have done. I think that's probably the best way to get into that stuff if you really can't go academic. I had a degree in communications, but I honestly don't think the degree was as helpful as just learning stuff myself on YouTube and trial and error and that kind of thing. So hopefully that's helpful to you, because I feel like we're getting to the point where you really don't need a degree for that, especially community management, if you know what you're doing and if you have the work ethic to kind of build your own stuff at the end of the day.
I think you're finding too, right? Like less and less companies are requiring 4-year degrees, and a lot of them want, right? They're looking for, can you bring value to the table that we don't already have? And how well can you convey that value once you're in a room getting interviewed, right?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
almost a whole battle.
And again, I kind of keep saying it, but I think adapting to whatever you're going for is really important. So even like within gaming, trying to get a community management position with an esports team versus like a brand like Legion or a software company, like there's so many different types of companies out there that value different skills in community management. So kind of identifying where you'd ideally like to end up and then basing what you learn around that is pretty important, and also tailoring like what's on your resume, what you talk about in an interview around things that they're going to care about for that brand is really important. So I would definitely take a minute to think through that for any brands that you really especially want to work with in the gaming scene.
So you mentioned portfolio, you mentioned resume, and you mentioned putting a lot of this together, and that actually flows so well into the next question, which is by Sherbet, and it's Sherbet with B-I-T at the end, so I'm not saying it wrong. So Sherbet says, for someone who is good at producing and managing content, but not really sure how they should go about fostering and managing a community, what advice do you have? So someone who could put together a portfolio of like creative works, how do they go about now looking at growing their community skills and managing that community and fostering that community?
Yeah, so this is a good question again because you've got the skills on the content side, which can be a very important part of community management. But now you have to actually manage and build the community, which is the other piece. And those two teams really look hand in hand. So I work on the community side at Lenovo, but there's a content team, and we work almost every day together on stuff because they're so connected for any community and any piece of content. When you put out a good piece of content, it's probably going to build a community around it. So it's kind of figuring out how those work together. I would say if you've already been producing or managing content, depending on where you've put it out, like see if you already have some community, if that's YouTube or Medium, or I'm not sure where you're putting it out right now, but you probably have some members you can build a community around in a sense, or look for an existing community in that space for whatever the theme of your content is, and then try to be part of that community. Again, look to maybe be a moderator or just be very active in the community to start with, and then kind of work into seeing if you can be part of events and offer something to the community. Again, I really feel like the community is a big piece of the content. There's not a lot of communities that exist without content in a sense. So I actually think building the quality content is sometimes the harder part, and then just taking care of the community comes after that. If you've built really strong content, you probably have a very interested community around that. And so it's just a matter of finding out like where you want to take that community. Like if you want to build a Discord for something of YouTube content or Reddit, really kind of learning what your audience prefers to communicate in a sense, and then building something that they would resonate with that way. So I hope that helps. Again, I'm not sure exactly where your content is coming from, but that hopefully would be a little help to you.
That's a really good perspective. I like that. The little pieces of content generate a community, and you can really use that to foster everything around it. I like
Exactly.
that.
Yeah. I think you think of any like YouTuber or Instagram piece, like those are all communities too, even though it's content. So I can't think of a place where you put out content that wouldn't have some community attached to it. And so again, I think that's the harder part because making really good content is very time consuming. Moderating stuff is hard, but comparatively, I think it's not quite as intensive as trying to come up with original ideas that are going to resonate with people at the end of the day.
Especially if you're more a left brain person, right? That
Yeah.
might make it even more of a challenge.
Exactly.
Perfect. Well, Jax Main, I really appreciate you teeing up so nicely for Sherbet's question. Ben, with that, we can keep rolling. These are actually all these remaining questions are flowing very, very nicely together. So Fidget, right back. Fidget, appreciate you. Fidget's asking, what's the hardest part about managing such a large community? Well, what's your biggest challenge?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's really interesting with Legion because it's really blown up over the last couple of years. I think, or sorry, last couple of months. Are we getting a video? Okay. Uh, yeah, I think it's really blown up. So trying to adapt to that when there are big fluctuations in a community, if it like really shoots up or really if there's some reason people leave a lot, that can be tough to react to quickly because a lot of times you're not expecting it if something just happened to take off. And you kind of have to frenzy to find a new moderator and set up some new structures. Like one thing, for example, in the Legion Discord is we've had like almost like tripled or doubled some huge influx in the Discord side. So we're trying to do things like set up new channels for people from different countries, which we didn't need when we were kind of where we at before, but now there's so many people that we kind of need some better segmentation there. So from a moderation perspective, I think it's being able to take care of all the questions and keep everything brand safe in the community when you have big moments like that. But then also, like, from a more long-term perspective, I think the retention piece is always tough because people's interests change a lot. So you can't just keep doing the same thing all the time in a community and expect that to keep working. You have to kind of keep iterating. Same thing with content. You have to keep trying new things because yes, you should rinse and repeat what works, but that only works for so long before people kind of lose interest. So trying to keep challenging yourself on new community mission angles or things to keep interest in the community, I think is one of the tough things too that I'm always thinking about on community. And I know our other community managers are as well.
Perfect. Fidget, thanks so much for the question. For the next one, Ben, we've got one. What was the process like for creating Get Got by a Gran? And how does that sort of project get started? And what was your role like in that process? And for everyone in the chat, there will be a video we're going to be showing. But if you want to take that one, Ben.
Yeah. So this Get Got by a Gran, this is a event we did last year with the community. And if you didn't know, Lenovo sponsors a team of esports players in CS:GO, but they're all 65 years and older, and they're called the Silver Snipers. And we've worked with them for a couple of years, but we did this event last year with 3 of their players, where we had 3 of them go against teams from the community in CS:GO. So there was an NA team and an EU team, and streamed it all on Twitch. I shoutcasted the whole thing. Fidget, who's in the chat, was part of the event. Actually, he was one of the players who was on the NA team, and it was a really cool event because the idea, it was during COVID, and it was to kind of promote cross-generational gaming, but also just doing events during this really tough time, especially for seniors, because it's really tough on the senior loneliness side. So it was cool to kind of bring those 2 audiences together. And we got really good feedback from the event. It was really fun to shoutcast, and it even ended up winning a Shorty Award, which is pretty cool. So one of the highlights of last year for sure.
Hey, congratulations. That is a fantastic award.
Thank you.
Fantastic award. With that, I think we actually have the Get Got by Gran video ready to showcase.
Let's do it.
I'm Crazy Boomer.
I'm Triggerfinger
from the Silver Snipers.
I'll battle any gamer. Too scared? Kiss my old.
Guys, it is time to kick off the Get Got by a Gran challenge, starting right here now on Twitch.
Go! Let's go!
I have my friends online. I don't feel alone.
It's never too late to start playing.
You just keep going. Stay in the fight. You're dead.
Oh no!
He's no damage.
Damn.
There we go. So Ben, awesome. Okay, congratulations for the piece of content and winning the Shorty Award for it. Fantastic stuff. And then for all the podcast listeners, you now have a fantastic incentive to go check out the VOD on the TSMU YouTube. I strongly recommend it. You will not regret it. And if you want to look the video up as well, it is Get Got by a Gran. Correct,
yes.
Ben?
It's a mouthful, but it's really funny.
Yeah,
Get Got by a Gran.
Fantastic piece of content, fantastic name too, just all around. Again, congratulations for the award and giving our podcast listeners a great incentive to go on to the TSMU YouTube. And with that, let's go ahead and let's keep rolling with the questions. We got a few more teed up here. So the next one is what is it like streaming for a brand, and how does that differ for streaming independently, right? Because you do both. So what is the differences there?
Yeah, this is a really fun question. I love streaming. I love the nerd side of streaming, if you guys didn't know. So I've had experience streaming for a brand for a couple of years, even before I joined Lenovo, and it's pretty interesting because you really, if you've streamed by yourself, it's very different than streaming for your own channel because you're representing a company when you stream. And it's even different than if you've got a sponsorship. It's not quite the same because it's still really your content at the end of the day. You just have the support of a partner. But when you're streaming for a brand, like you are that brand in that moment and you are kind of the face of the brand to an extent. So everything you do has to represent that brand, not just like in terms of values, but you are representing the brand in reality, essentially. So thinking of like people are going to ask you about stuff about the brand that you might not have the answer to. Like I get a lot of super specific product questions because I'm the Legion channel, but I'm not a product expert. So I can't always answer like how to undervolt your CPU with the Wi-Fi 40 with this mod. Like I just can't answer every question that people ever have for Lenovo. But knowing how to answer those questions of routing people of, okay, I don't know, but here's where you can get this official Lenovo support or that kind of thing. That's one side of it for Lenovo in particular. But also just realizing that you kind of have to help establish the identity of the brand to an extent, especially if it's a new platform like Twitch or something, which a lot of brands don't have a presence on Twitch yet. So you kind of have the time to take the time to think through what would a brand strategy for this platform look like for this brand, and how's it going to make sense of what the brand has done for the last X number of years, and kind of where we want to go in the future. So it's different because it's like more free and less free than streaming on your own channel at the same time, in that like you're not as wrapped up in your identity with this. When you're streaming for a brand, ultimately, you know, it's that channel, versus when you're streaming for yourself, everything is you. Like it's all about you at the end of the day. So there's some interesting like trade-offs to it. And it's fun to alternate between a brand channel and your own channel because you really feel kind of the subtle piece of that, and how you can do some things on your personal channel and might not be able to do on the brand channel because of either low viewership or like that audience is not going to care about something the same way that your personal audience might. So if you've ever thought about streaming for a brand or have done it, you probably know what I'm talking about. And it's just a really fun process to iterate on because it's so new. Like there's so few brands that consistently stream out there, relative to how many brands eventually I think we'll get into it. So it's pretty fun to iterate on. And yeah, I just nerd out about this stuff because I love streaming strategy.
Yeah, I mean, the identity piece has to be a huge part, right? Because really, when you're on camera for Legion, you're not Ben Green. I mean, you are Ben Green, but like, you're Legion, right? Like you're you are literally the brand on a stream. That has to be a really tough balance. Probably fun, but
yeah, it's fun. I think it's a lot of responsibility to an extent because again, like especially if you're kind of pioneering that for the channel, like it's really up to you to even before I was on the channel, there was a guy named Jeff streaming on Legion who kind of, because he was the first one to stream on that channel, he kind of set what that would be like for the brand. And I think that's true of any new streaming on a brand channel. So it's kind of your responsibility to make it feel cohesive with the rest of the brand and not just feel like there's a lot of brands that will just kind of flip on a stream and just be under a brand, and there's really no difference from any other channel. They just happen to be under a brand. So figuring out what you want to do differently from that and make it feel like something that works with the rest of that brand experience, like the Legion experience. So for our channel, we do a lot of things like Legion benchmarking live on the stream and interviews with staff people. And these are things I probably would never do on my personal channel. But for the Legion audience in particular, they make a lot of sense because that's the kind of stuff they probably want to see. Not Joe Schmo playing Overwatch for 4 hours, just doing nothing to do with Legion. So thinking through a strategy like that is pretty important, I think, for it to resonate with the audience of that brand.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. And obviously another big part. I think you undersold or understated yourself. You know a lot about our products, right? Like you
Well,
do. Don't understate yourself.
so
like that. Yeah.
I'm learning. So that's the thing too, is like when I came into this job, I really knew very little about Lenovo products, but I recognized that our community and our Twitch audience and everyone else, there's a lot of interest, obviously, in Legion products and what you can do with them. So I kind of adapted the Twitch, especially the Twitch strategy, to be a lot about doing some live stuff because that's something that really no other part of Lenovo has done yet. especially in a live way. That's less of like a polished YouTube video, but more like you get right down and see it. And so being able to realize that like I had to learn more about the products to be able to talk with the community in the way that they're talking. I think that's true of like any space. Like if you want to work for TSM, but you don't know anything about League of Legends, it's probably not going to work very well in your job if you want to talk to the community in a way that makes sense. So I think that's pretty important for any brand. Like you have to know a lot about the product if it's a product focused company, software, same kind of thing, because that's people care about a lot of times in that community.
So it sounds like for community management for brands, right? Like understanding what you have to drive for the company, right? And I think you hit that a little bit right. It can't just be Joe Schmo playing Overwatch or whatever game for a long time. At the end of the day, like we need to be selling more computers, because if we aren't selling computers, you and I don't have careers, or we don't have careers at Lenovo.
Right.
And
Or putting out some bigger value for the brand. Even it's not like
Sure.
like I don't have a quota. I must sell 3 computers today on this stream, right? But like there's got to be some value I'm creating for the brand as a whole each time I go live, and not just like using an excuse to get paid to stream, right? Which a lot of people think like, oh, you must have the easiest job. You just get paid to stream on Twitch or something. But it's not nearly that easy, because of all you have to think through of what's involved in this kind of stuff, and making sure it's going to consistently resonate, because there are reviews with people, and people are internally going to make sure that you are doing something that's going to be worth the time, right? So it's really involved, and it's a lot of fun though if you are up to the challenge to kind of be the face of the brand and pioneer some cool stuff like that.
Perfect. Well, Ben, I think we've got time for one last one here. We're gonna creep on in. So for the last one, we've got teed up for you. And I'm really interested to know this one, because I haven't gotten the chance to ever ask you this. But how did you get your first job in the industry, and what was that experience like? And then after going through that, what advice do you have, just to close on out? What advice do you have to give anyone trying to make that same breakthrough?
Man, I feel like I had a pretty unique way into the industry in a sense. I got hired right out of college. So I went to undergrad, got a degree in communications from UNC Chapel Hill, and got hired right out of college into a gaming startup in the area. And that was pretty lucky. I will say, I think I got that job specifically because I had gaming background. Like I put Twitch experience on my resume. And I think that actually got me the job, because the place I was working with, even though it was a gaming startup, there were a lot of people who applied that were not really in the gaming scene. They were just kind of regular managers, or maybe they had worked at other places but weren't really endemic to gaming at all. And so that's why I talked about in the past, like if you're applying to a company that hasn't really broken into gaming yet but wants to, and isn't really getting the right applicants for that kind of thing, you can kind of stand out that way if you really have some direct experience to talk about. And the interview is a big piece of that too. I think you have to demonstrate you know what you're talking about, not just put on the resume. But I was fortunate to have that job for about 3 years, and that was marketing in general. So not just community management, but working on social media and advertising and graphics and all sorts of stuff. And then that eventually transitioned into Lenovo, and having a lot of experience directly in community management is what got me this job essentially. And I recently moved from contractor to full time. So that's the quick version of it. A big piece of that though was doing a lot of content and community management myself. So I did a lot of stuff on the side with working on YouTube content, writing blogs and hosting podcasts and articles outside of just my job, just to build up my resume. And I put that stuff on LinkedIn, put it on YouTube, obviously, and kind of linked it whenever I could, and it made sense on applications. And eventually that stuff was received pretty well. If you put a lot of effort into it, you can kind of make some gaming content that, even if it's gaming specific, it's probably pretty easy to understand to people who aren't in the gaming space. If it's presented in a great way, if it's a really polished article or piece of video. So I think as long as you just communicate that to people, of even if it's not directly in gaming, the job you want to get into, how you can show that experience still carries over to the new job essentially. And if you're in gaming, even better, because again, people are probably more familiar with that side in particular. You talk about Twitch and Discord and that kind of stuff. So is that helpful? Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think you knocked it out. I think you knocked it out of the park, Ben. Well, Ben, thank you so much for choosing to spend your hour doing this. This is fantastic. And community management. I thank you for like giving a lot more of that background information, because there is I can't state it enough for all the audience. There is so much that goes on beyond just being the face of that stream. And I hope everyone got a chance to see that from you. So Ben, thanks so much. Everyone else, thank you so much for jumping in with the questions, and making this a super involved conversation with Ben. For the next TSMU Q&A series, we have someone very near and dear to both mine and Ben's hearts. Emily Kroll, the brand manager for Lenovo Legion, who will be on the next guest for the Q&A series. That will be on June 30th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So be sure you are following us on TSMU on Twitch so you know when the channel goes live. Be sure you're involved in the Discord channel, involved in the community, and starting that network that TSM has teed up so perfectly for everyone with this TSMU community. And make sure you're following TSMU across all social media to make sure you get all of the updates. And with that, everyone, I hope you have a great night. Ben, thanks again for joining.
Thanks, guys. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.